Blazer, Ben, Morgan, right, Bailey, Jose, Johnny, Akeem, Thomas. Gerardo, Isaiah, Taylor, Julian, all right. Shut. Computers shut. Phones one. Did you get your keys?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, question one. Right. Given the action of gravity, what shape is the flight path for a long jumper? Right. Given that they're impacted by the action of gravity, what shape is the flight path for a long jumper? So if you can't remember the technical word, you can use a descriptive word, or you could draw a diagram. The technical word would be the best option, but the others will at least show that you know. What shape is the flight path for a long jumper? Question two, how many laws of motion are there? How many laws of motion are there? Question three, does increasing stability lead to increased or decreased mobility? Does increasing stability lead to increased or decreased mobility? What shape is the flight path of a long jumper? How many laws of motion are there? Does increasing stability increase or decrease mobility? All right, make sure your name's on. So walk off several times.
There we go.
Thomas here. Toby. All right. So, flight path of anything, actually, once it's left whatever's projecting it. But the flight path is a parabola. So, parabola, rainbow-shaped, semicircle, or that drawing counts as a point.
Yay.
All right? 1 point. How many laws of motion are there? 3. Okay, so 1 point if there are 3. Increasing stability decreases mobility. So if they put decrease or an arrow pointing down or, right? Okay, so give them a total out of 3 for me and pass those forwards. Thank you. Started the notes on Friday, so let's have a look at some very fundamental information about biomechanics. When you take 312, you'll learn a lot more about these ideas, all right? But we want just enough to help us out with what we're seeing happen with a movement skill. So the term center of gravity represents, simplified, a point about which your mass can be said to act. All right? So if we're looking at the body as a whole, it's an abstract, it doesn't exist, right? But mathematically, we can calculate it and it impacts what we see happen because gravity acts on that point, right? So it is somewhere around your navel, a little bit higher, a little bit lower, depending on how tall you are, where your muscle mass is, right? Generally for males, because typically they're taller, tends to be a little bit higher. For girls, because they carry most of their mass around their hips and their butt and their thighs, tends to be a little bit lower. Yeah. All right, but everybody's got individual differences there. So when we're moving, the center of gravity can shift outside the body depending upon the shape that we make. So under certain extreme circumstances, the point at which we can be moving around might be outside. So in this diagram on the left here, this very, very tight diving pike, his center of gravity probably moved a little bit out into the fold of the pike. Right? On this picture here, where the athlete is doing a Fosbury flop, a high jump, that because of this big arch, their center of gravity moves outside to about here. Right? It's important to have a rough idea where the center of gravity might be, because that's where gravitational force acts on the skill. All right? Gravitational force always acts through the line of the center of gravity. That's where it got its name from. So again, if we simplify, we don't, because it becomes a little more complicated when you start looking at different segments and things. So if we look at the body as a whole, all right, the only cause of motion when you look at the body as a whole is the application of an external force. Right? If I want to move from point A to point B, it doesn't matter whether point A is on the floor and point B is up in the air, or point A is here and point B is forwards. In order to move, we have to apply an external force. All right. With me so far? Sure?
Yes.
Because that idea is very important. All right? If I'm standing here and nothing is pushing me, I cannot move. Right? Yes, sir?
When you start running, aren't you, is that like your own motion? Aren't you creating that yourself?
It isn't. Actually, we're going to come to that in just a little while. That's a great question. You apply a force and something applies a force back. Okay? It's a good question. So, Newton, very smart chap, very, very long time ago, but what he came up with, the laws of physics that he developed, still hold true. With everything we've learned, with everything we know, we haven't shown that his initial ideas were wrong. All right? So the very first law that he came up with was that an object at rest stays at rest, an object in motion will stay in motion unless they're acted on by a force. Simply put, that means that if I'm going to move an object, I have to apply force to it. If I want to change the direction that an object is moving in, I have to apply force to it. If I want to stop something moving, I have to apply force to it. The term inertia you hear a lot when you're looking at mechanical, physical ideas, right? So inertia is how much resistance to motion does an object have, and it's based upon the mass of an object, right? So an example of this would be if you think about a really big linebacker. Is that right? That's the position that's big, right? In the game? Okay, all right. I get them muddled up sometimes. I don't know much about football. I don't want to be giving you the wrong example because then that will be confusing. All right, so think about a big linebacker and next to him put a small female cross-country runner, right? And think about if I walk up to them and push on their chest, which one is easier to move? The cross-country runner, right? So if I push her, she's likely to at least take a step back. If I push the linebacker, he's just gonna go, right? Because he has a lot of inertia, and her inertia is lower because her mass is lower. Right? Another term that we have to understand is momentum, right? And momentum is the product of mass times velocity. Right? So my mass times and velocity and speed are technically different because velocity has direction, but in everyday language we tend to interchange speed and velocity. That drives people who are trained biomechanists absolutely batty, and the rest of us don't care very much because we know what we mean, right? But for someone who's an actual biomechanist, it drives them nuts when you say speed and you meant velocity and vice versa, all right? So my mass times my speed, how how much I weigh times how fast I'm going equals my momentum, or an object's momentum. So again then, if we take the idea of the law, that means that in order to move ourselves or to move an object that's part of the game, we have to exert a force. If I'm going to exert a force, I have to be able to produce a force. Right? So my body has to have a mechanism to produce force that I can apply in order to move an object. Change the direction of an object or stop an object. The more inertia an object has, the harder it is to move that object, and the more force application has to be applied. Right? I have to be able to create a bigger force to move something that has more inertia. Does that make sense? So let's think about why we need this when we're looking at our fundamental motor skills. Right? If I'm going to swing a baseball bat, the baseball bat has mass. So the first thing that my brain has to work out is how much force do I have to develop to overcome the inertia that the bat has in order to move the bat. All right? Force production in humans involves contracting muscles, and my brain is in charge of contracting muscles. So it's got to work out which muscle and how many muscles and how hard does the contraction have to be to overcome the inertia of this particular object. So that's part of the learning curve for someone learning a new skill. The second part of the learning curve, based upon what we were saying here, is that once I've applied enough force to move it, how do I stop it? Right? Because we said we have to apply force to stop it as well. So I might be able to work out how to get it going, but now I've got to work out which muscles do I contract in order to stop it. Right? That's even trickier for the brain to learn. So sometimes you'll see people jump, but they can't land. When they land, they fall. Because I have to apply force to stop myself as I'm landing, and that's actually harder than the initial application to get myself going in the first place. Right? Think about when you're running. Right, so you guys were out on the field this morning sprinting your butts off as fast as you could go. I was watching you from the car park. Very impressive. Right? Think about what happens when you're running that fast. What happens when you try to stop? How long does it take to stop once you're going really quick? A little bit of distance, right? You don't get to run really, really fast and then just stop, because it takes a lot of force to stop. And if you applied that much force, your knees would explode.
Oh.
Right? So you can't stop because you have to apply the force over a little bit of distance so that you can apply a force that's safe enough that you don't break yourself. Right? That makes sense? Okay? So take the info, keep trying. Can I put the info into my life? The more you put it into your life, what you do, the more sense it makes. So we can use Newton's first law to help us coach events where moving an object is important. So that object might be me, the object might be a ball or a javelin. Right? If the goal of the skill is to move that object further away, so distance, or if the goal of the skill is to move the object faster, then I have two ways of doing that if I use the idea behind Newton's first law. Right? The first idea is I have to increase the force that's applied to the object. Okay, well that's kind of obvious. We all go to the gym, we do our strengthening, we get stronger so that we can apply more force to something. Okay, so that one is relatively obvious. The second one, though, is a bit more subtle. Right? If I can't, this is assuming increasing force, bless you, increasing force means I increase strength. Increasing strength takes time. I can't do that in one training session, right? So to do number one, I'm looking at a period of time to achieve that. But what I can do immediately, using Newton's first law, is increase the distance over which the force is applied. So the stopping idea is an example of that, but also, the reason we want a big step when we throw a ball for distance is the bigger the step is, the longer I can apply force to the ball, and the further the ball will go, or the faster the ball will go, which is why when you watch baseball with a really good pitcher, they do that ludicrous. I mean, they're so flexible in their hips. Right? Think about how big some of them manage to step, because the bigger the step, the longer I can hang on to the ball before I have to let go. Right? Same in soccer. You watch a really good soccer player, particularly someone who's good at taking penalty kicks. The step before they swing their leg for the ball is huge. Because if we apply mechanical principles, physiologically mechanical principles, I can increase the distance of the object or the speed of the object. Right? So what kind of constraints, particularly if you're looking at individual constraints, might impact what I can do here? All right, so be thinking about that. I have the picture of the picture. What constraints might impact how big a step I can take? Right. So if I'm going to add length of time, I'm going to add the distance for force application, I can do it linearly. I can increase the length of the step. So if I'm going to increase the length of the step, I have to balance on one leg for longer, right? If I take a little step, I'm only on one leg for a little amount of time. If I'm going to take a big step, I have to be on one leg for a long time. So what happens if this leg isn't very strong? Can't take a big step. So I have to have strength, which is an individual constraint. I can also increase rotational distance if I can move my arm further back or my leg further back. Right? So the amount of distance that I'm applying force might be rotational. So I have to have a large range of motion in my shoulders or my hips. So if I'm less flexible, that might impact how much force I can apply to the ball. So flexibility is an individual constraint that might play a role. What else might stop me moving my leg through a big range of motion as I get older? Not just flexibility of my hamstrings and
Aging,
what happens as we age.
you lose function or ability to function, full function.
Right, so synovial fluid decreases, so moving the joint through that range of motion becomes harder. What if I have an injury? Or what if I develop arthritis in that joint? Right? Then I may not be able to maintain my range of motion, and therefore, gradually, as the arthritis gets worse, the distance I can kick the ball gets worse. Right? That makes sense? Because of mechanics. Even if you take everything else out of the picture, the pure mechanics will say the distance the ball can go will be less. Right? Just the maths is going to say that. So often when we're teaching, we're looking for an optimal balance between force and distance, because someone may not be strong enough to take the biggest step I want them to take. I might have to compromise slightly. Right? Or maybe I recognize that we need to give some of our training time over to increasing flexibility, because ultimately that would increase performance. Questions on law number 1? Is it? All right, try to use it when you go to the gym today. Try to think about it. All right, so law number 2, then, Mr. Newton, clever so-and-so that he was, says that an object's force, the force an object has, is a function of its mass times its acceleration. Okay. I can flip that equation around very simply and say that therefore acceleration of an object is equal to the force of the object divided by its mass. So what if it's at constant velocity? Well, if it's at constant velocity, what does that mean acceleration is going to be?
0.
0, right? Because acceleration is a change in velocity over time. So if velocity is exactly the same, if I'm on the treadmill running at 6 miles an hour and I leave it at 6 miles an hour, I'm not accelerating. Right? So acceleration would be 0. So acceleration is a change in velocity over a change in time. It's also equal to force divided by mass. So what does that mean when we're working? On any given day, right, I can't change someone's force application. I can't make someone stronger on a given day. They can only throw as hard as they can throw on that day. But I can use my constraints idea to manipulate what they're doing so that we can increase acceleration for them, right? This might be important because if you're working with an age group where the goal of the activity that you've given them is to throw the ball, so you've got your gym class split up into two lines on either side of the basketball court, and the goal is to practice throwing the ball across the court to their partner, right? And you have one or two kids who cannot apply enough force to the basketball to get it all the way across to their partner. And so they're wasting time running around picking up balls that are rolling around on the gym floor, plus that's dangerous because someone might step on it, right? All kinds of problems. They're not practicing their throwing because they're running, or they're catching because they're running after a ball on the floor, blah, 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 blah. Right? So how do I use what I know about mechanics and what I can know and think about manipulating with regards to the triangle to improve this activity in my PE class? Right? So, let's say that they're applying a force of 10, however we're measuring force. Okay? And the basketball weighs 3 pounds, I don't know, 5, let's say 5 pounds, because that makes it easy. That's what obviously they're throwing a medicine ball, not a basketball, right? So acceleration on the ball is 2. And that acceleration isn't enough to get the ball all the way across the court. Does that make sense? So if I use my constraints triangle and I understand the mechanics, this person's force application is not going to change within that class time. If I give them a lighter ball, so the mass is 2, acceleration is 5. And 5 is enough acceleration to get the ball all the way across the court. And they're both successful, and they both get a good feeling, and they want to keep trying and do it again. So I use my constraints theory to manipulate what? What did I manipulate? Weight of the ball. What kind of constraint is that? The weight.
You changed the ball?
I changed the ball. I could change the person over time. It would be equipment, which is under which
Task.
task. Very good. So I change a task constraint. I improve performance. We get better throwing. We get better catching. Everybody's happy, right? I change the task constraint because I know, bless you, because I know that A equals force over mass. Right? At the beginning of the semester I said, this is about not what you do instinctively. Most of you have enough experience with movement that if you were watching these kids throw the ball back and forwards across the basketball court and it wasn't working, one of the things you might try would be give them a lighter ball. Right? So you would do that, hopefully instinctively, rather than yell at the kids to throw the ball harder because they're not doing the skill. Right? That would be bad. Okay? The question is not, I would do that instinctively. The question is why. Right? You have to know why you're doing it. Because ultimately, something you try won't work. And then you have to have more tools to try something different. All right? So, enough, I think. Let's see, where am I? Third law. So first law is what?
An object can rest will stay at rest, and object can motion will stay in motion until acted upon.
Very nice. Right? First law is I have to apply a force. An object at rest is going to stay at rest. An object in motion is going to stay in motion unless an external force is applied. What's law number 2? Okay, the force of an object is related to its mass and its acceleration. So, on Wednesday, I want you to come in with those two ideas very solid, and then on Wednesday we'll look at what's the third law. It's probably the one you've heard the most frequently in everyday language. And how do we use the third law to make us better teachers of movement skills? Right?
Did you see my phone?
Make sense? We've got time to do the third law.
Which one y'all got, the water one? Okay. Hey, you, where you went?
Get some sleep, young Tony.
Hey, buddy. Take it easy, bro.
Good question. We're going to come back to it on Wednesday.
All right.